you with Al, please?
Can you stop that and go ahead of here?
I think it's already going.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, sorry.
We got everybody here. Mr. Brown, could you please issue the invitation?
Lord, we are always grateful to come before you at this time. We as your children are eager to have the wisdom imparted upon us to make these decisions for the county, that we make the right things possible for the people of this county. We're always mindful of our duties, and we know that we should be concentrating upon your word. Help it to guide our lives as well as our thoughts. We ask this in your Son's name, Jesus Christ.
Okay. Without objection, we have a pretty hefty agenda, and I'm going to add to it. So I've got a few amendments here without objection. So I'd like to add under my report approval of authorization for grant funding for an APC. That would be there would be a new item E under mine. I would also like to add under the report of the county mayor 2 items. One of these is actually I'll just do one of these. One of these is a request for tribal funds for Veterans Park. I think we can do both of them. And then the next one would be, so that would be 2 under your report, Mr. Mayor, and then after that would be a request for funds for appropriation of funds for the archives building. And I believe, also one more under my report. Actually, let's do this. Under new business, item 4, I would like to add transfer of funds. No, wait. Let's not do that. Let's
should
put under
be
transfer C2B, transfer of funds for county clerk. C2B, transfer of funds for county clerk. Those are my additions. I'd entertain a motion to approve with those additions.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Recognition of the public. I'm not gonna lie, this is kind of hard to read. Mr. Michael Bartlett?
If you're reading the first 3, that's left from legislative, Matt. So 1, 2, and 3 are from a different.
Okay, got it. Mr. Stan Jones. Stan Jones?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Could you move up here and speak? Please state your name and address.
Stan Jones, 1024 Heathrow Drive in Hendersonville. This is addressed to Bearcat.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I had the opportunity to present last week at the meeting, and I wanted to do the same tonight in thought of the debate, the discussion between an armored personnel carrier such as the Bearcat versus the use of aftermarket armored sport utility vehicles such as a Chevy Suburban. My personal background career is 32 years of law enforcement. 4 years was on the Orlando, Florida Police Department SWAT team. 4 of those years was on the Gallatin Police Department SWAT team. 20 years as a special agent with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, in which 3 years I did personal protection for the head of the DEA in Washington, D.C. During that time, I had the opportunity to use and utilize on a full-time basis fully armored Chevy Suburbans, both in Washington, D.C. and other parts of the world, including Bogota, Colombia, and Afghanistan. There's a big comparison and difference between an armored personnel carrier and an aftermarket sport utility vehicle. If you were to look at the photographs that I saw comparisons made, the biggest thing is glass surface area of both vehicles and the purpose of these vehicles. The purpose for the vehicle here in Sumner County would be for the SWAT team to have to use in SWAT call-outs, whether it's a barricaded gunman, a hostage situation, or the execution of search warrants, in addition to all the other purposes that it can be used off-road during inclement weather, flooding, search and rescue and such. To use a sport utility vehicle in a SWAT capacity is a misuse of a vehicle. A fully armored sport utility vehicle basically is the purpose of transporting a protectee from point A to point B. And when things go south, when bullets start to fly, the job of that vehicle, the use of that vehicle, is to evacuate a person, get them away from danger. Where the Bearcat would be used by the SWAT team here in Sumner County to approach danger, to go to the fight, versus getting away from the fight. The surface area of glass, and I don't want to get into specifics to compromise safety or the integrity of the protection it provides. The glass in a sport utility vehicle, even when fully armored, that glass is just buying you time under gunfire, and it literally is just seconds. It's not anything. It's not bulletproof. It's not going to withstand much of anything. It will withstand some, but it is basically buying you time to emergently evacuate. And that's not what the Sumner County SWAT team is wanting to use it for. It's not to evacuate. It's to go to the danger, to go to the fight. Another thing to strongly consider is, and you look at the guys on the team, I'm no exception at 250 pounds. When you have a SWAT operator that is dressed out in gear, you're beyond 300 pounds in gear and size. And a fully armored Chevy Suburban is going to be enough to deploy 3 officers, no more. By the time you get gear on, for one thing, drivers committed to the vehicle, they're not going to be able to get out and deploy with the team. By the time you get 3 operators in the seats, 2 in the back and 1 in the front passenger seat, there's no more room for anyone else in that vehicle to be able to reasonably deploy. It can't happen. If you use it as a rescue vehicle, God forbid a downed officer, and you're using to approach, then you have a 3-man team that would be going out, 1 to cover, 2 to transport a victim officer, or another victim for that matter, and now you're exceeding the capacity of what the vehicle provides by now you don't have enough room to get everybody back in. And that's a huge hazard and a waste of a resource. Whereas a Bearcat is much larger, it can position itself to be much more effective and to protect someone in a rescue situation and to be able to accommodate the actual rescue with room inside the vehicle. Another big thing is that the aftermarket of a sport utility vehicle, by the time you add the appropriate armament weight onto that vehicle, even though it goes through an adjustment with the transmission, an adjustment with the hinges for the doors, and adjustment with the suspension, it still is a significant amount of weight on basically the same size tires that are designed for the street. It does not have the tire capacity to be off-road in northern middle Tennessee in inclement weather and be in mud. It's going to sink in the mud. It's going to become useless off-road in Tennessee, where the Bearcat is designed everything from tire surface size to torque to horsepower to manage that in an off-road capacity. Another significant point is back in the older days when Chevy had the Suburban, they called them the barn doors. Those doors open like a regular hinge door. Well, they have since gone to the door that rises up. And because of the piston capacity of that, they don't armor that because it can't support the weight of that to go up like a hatchback. So they make an interior door, which is armored, and then that hatch door closes over that. So to go out the back, you can't open the door to get out, to open the second door to get out. So it basically becomes useless to try and evacuate the vehicle out the back end because you've got 2 doors to deal with, one of which is ballistic and the other which is not. It becomes very cumbersome and very awkward to try and get in or out through the back, which, again, in a rescue situation, it's very complicated quickly. If you have any questions, I'd love to address it. If not, thank you for your time and consideration.
Yes, sir. Laura Baker.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. Laura Baker, 424 AB Reed Road in Portland. And I want to thank Mr. Jones for your service and all you veterans here today. What a nice surprise that you're seeing you here and see lots of Vietnam vets. And I just wanted to say welcome back. Sorry. always get moved when I see Vietnam vets. So, last week, Emergency Services Committee meeting, I wasn't able to make it into the room, even though it was my only wish for my birthday. But in any event, the discussion on this APC and all, I did watch the video afterwards, and I have to say, I was kind of distressed over some of the comments that were made in the narrative that was made, saying that if we don't support this, then we don't support emergency services. And frankly, I'm a little tired of these false arguments that says once it's this or that, and if this, it can't be that. And I found that very a false representation of anybody who might speak against it. And frankly, I hesitate to even speak about it because I'll probably be a pariah, as I already am, and it'll pass, and then you look even worse about it. But as I said, I didn't appreciate a lot of the comments that were made. And one of the things that, questions I would have, and I have several little points I'd like to make, is why, if this was such a need here, why did this never come up before? Until FEMA dangles some money out there and suddenly we have to grab at the money. And so I find that a little interesting. And then in the way in, we talked to a couple of people in the emergency services group, and they told us that the need for this thing is like on a monthly basis. And I found that very distressing because of all the meetings we've gone to, I've not heard of those kinds of reports of incidences here, and I haven't heard it reported to the Emergency Services Committee either, so I found that very interesting. And would encourage you to ask more questions about that, because I think that those kinds of things should be coming before the commission if we have that kind of need here. And that would also raise questions about what other law enforcement needs we have, not just in terms of equipment, but manpower. Because if we're having that kind of problems here, then I think we've got to do a much more thorough analysis of what's going on. It also raises the question to me of now, do we have a whole new special interest group? This is eerily reminiscent of 2012 Strong Schools, where we have a whole new special interest group come out now, and even frankly, the committee, that anything that is asked for in this group feels like we need to oblige. And there was a lot of concern expressed from people in the committee, and I know the public is, once the feds have their claws into us, what does that mean? And, you know, people said, well, our people will never turn on us. And I understand where that comes from. These are good people, and they live in our county, and we love and respect these people, right? They serve us, and this is no disparagement to them. But I will tell you that I don't feel confident that we have anybody now who, if the feds came in here and said, I want to haul you off because you've attended something in Washington, D.C. that we don't approve of, that anybody's going to stand at the gate of our county and say, hell no, you're not taking those people out because they attended an event. And what will happen is some people will be attending a MAGA event, and the feds will say, hey, Sumner County, go in there and use that thing to break that thing up, that event up. And when we say no, if we say no, they'll say, well, we'll take that thing and commandeer it against those people because we paid for it and you're gonna do what we tell you to do with it. So it's not the way people think it's gonna happen, but that's why we fear the federal government. And as somebody mentioned in that Emergency Services Committee last week, that in public comments, that we never thought we'd see some of the things that are happening in our country right now. And frankly, I'm more afraid of that than some of the things that machine will address. And one final thing, and let me just say, I support emergency services. Again, I don't like this false narrative, but I like to have discussion about things, and I like to make sure we thoroughly vet things. And so many times, over the 8 years we've been watching County Commission, we never hear about what the extra costs are gonna be later on. We're gonna have a garage now, we gotta store the thing in, or it needs special kind of maintenance, or whatever, and I'd like to have a discussion about that. And in a little bit to the chairman here, who says everybody's a fiscal conservative until it's budget time, I would like to add to that everyone's a fiscal conservative until federal free dollars are involved. And just remember, nothing's for free. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Shepard?
Oh, boy.
it's rare that you, oh, Kevin Baker, 424 A.B. Wade Road. It's rare that I get to follow my wife. But she does make some good points. I think this is gonna be the one time I'll be able to say something that Merrill Hyde wasn't able to say that he was there. Although you were on the commission back then. This is, and I'm gonna use a word that she used, eerily similar to something that happened on May 2nd, 2016. Is Commissioner Becker in the room? Because he was sitting here. Oh, Commissioner Becker and who was the other? Oh, Ben Harris. The conversations that we had last Monday were just like the conversations that we had in May of 2016 when the county wanted to buy a tracked, all-terrain vehicle. It was gonna cost the county $119,000. Okay, a grant, but we were gonna have to shell out. And the same kind of narrative was used, as Laura mentioned. Like, if we don't have this thing, the same kind of discussions. Metro Nashville had just lost a police officer in a flood. And the concerns were that the May floods were coming and we need this thing. If we need the things, we should get them. We talked about the shootings that happened in Westmoreland a few years back, and we needed infrared goggles. We got infrared goggles now because we needed those things. But when people talk about militarized vehicles, the public really is concerned about that, not just me, the public. And it's a real thing. So I'd like you to think about that. Like I said, I'm not gonna go through the list of who the people were that voted for him. I think you're gonna be a little bit surprised of what happened, because we don't own one of those things. You'll be surprised at the people who voted against it based on some of the stuff that we pushed back on, but some of the people who did vote for it. Like I say, it's funny how history kind of replays itself. I don't want to see that happen again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. That concludes the recognition of the public. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, my report. First one here is to, item A is to reconsider the energy efficient and conservation block grant. When we spoke about this last month, Mr. Mayor, you, at the time you weren't 100% sure, it kind of passed your mind, it was a long meeting, what this were going to be used for, and I think you've since called me and noted that this was going to be used for an HVAC. I'd entertain a motion for discussion or for approval. Okay,
I'll move to approve.
I'll second this for discussion here. Okay, anybody want to get a cue on this?
I do. I'm gonna say the same thing. I'm gonna say the same thing I said last month. This is another one of those dirty federal grants where the requirements, when you read the fine print on this thing, the juice is not worth the squeeze. One of it is, it literally says it's Biden's bill to tackle the climate crisis with a goal of building on an equitable energy economy to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the county will be required to submit energy efficiency and conservation strategies that include encouraging behavioral changes amongst the population, development of infrastructure such as greenways, pathways and walkways, and using wind energy for government buildings. This is another political ramification of tried and true failed socialistic policies from the Biden administration with federal dollars and strings attached to the county, and I don't want that money. I'm voting no on it.
Mr. Brown?
This thing has a whole lot of inspections that have to be done, according to DEI. That's, we're gonna have to do a whole lot of things to make sure that we are giving out contracts to certain people, and then once follow up with all that, we will have to have an army of inspectors. just for $77,000. We're not even getting, you know, I see that the thing added this time, all the other states and localities, and some of them are getting, you know, quite a bit of money compared to what we're getting, but we're only getting $77,000, and I just don't see that. Again, and the thing that I pointed out last month is it's going to change. It's already said that in the document, it will change, and we know how things change in the federal government.
Mr. Long, or do you have some notes on this? I know you had a discussion about it.
Talked to Ms. Northlead, and what she told me was that the amount was for air conditioners, and as far as her understanding, the amount of reporting that was required was to show that these air conditioners were just more efficient than the ones we're replacing. And we have done these types of grants before with a lot of these stipulations. But I'm not speaking for or against. I was just approached to see if you could reconsider.
Yeah. I have one comment, and it's just this. It's this very similar kind of comment that I had on my last during legislative relevant to hiring. I don't know how things are going to go with the Bearcat, but I can see there are a lot of people in here who've been for it. There are people in there, a lot of pressure to apply for this grant for federal funds for a Bearcat. And we know, you know, there are going to be stipulations on that set of federal funds that we don't like. If we approve the one, I will find it interesting if we approve the one and not the other, for consistency's sake. But I would maybe note here that is there, Mr. Strickler, would there be any way to basically amend this motion to approve it, but with a resolution that states basically we reject any of the federal guidelines, reporting requirements that come along with it? So we'll take your money, but we won't abide by these. Will that work? Probably not.
You have to
sign a contract.
I mean, it's our money. It's our tax money, right?
I don't even have to research that one for you. Yeah, you'll have to sign
I mean-
you'll have to sign a federal contract, and it'll have all
All
those
right, well,
stipulations
Just
in
strike
it,
it.
and yeah.
Nice try.
go ahead.
You said we have applied for these grants in the past, received them. What have we been reporting?
My understanding is that we did the Greenway is an energy efficiency or one of these, and then maybe some additional requirements, but we use some of them on the Greenway because they are alternative walking versus cars. So that's what some of those grants.
I don't
Pass
care
every
if we
one.
pass it or not.
I just want to get discussion, man. Same thing. Like, you know.
I was just approached to see if it could be reconsidered because they thought there may be additional.
So what we're saying is we're happy to pay the extra $77,000, Mr. Becker.
Yeah, what was which specific location is this going into?
We haven't determined specific locations. It was just to buy air conditioning units. We've got 40, possibly more. I'll report on that. I'm still working on the jail right now of the R22 systems that we're gonna have to start looking at. And we've been talking about replacing those. We've got ARPA funds that we're thinking about using. This was an opportunity for $77,000 to replace possibly 3 of them. If we don't want to do it, that's fine with me. I mean, I'm not building a Greenway. I'm not doing any equity or anything like that. I'm putting 3 air conditioning units in. That's it. And they'll be better than what was there.
One of the things Commissioner Schmidt and I were talking about is there's a new Freon requirement that's happening in '25. So not only will our R22 units that were starting to get phased out in 1987 will be obsolete, so will everything else we've got to date. I agree with Mr. Mansfield. This comes with so many strings attached and it's so little money. I think it would be a foolish thing for us to do with the with the county dollars. It's just too many restrictions. There are so many things that go into energy efficiency. It's not just air conditioning units, it's insulation, it's roofing, it's everything known to man. It's a rat's nest we don't want to get involved
Mr.
in.
Mansfield?
We approved in November, I think, a $50-something thousand grant that Commissioner Boyd found that we're actually talking about for the Veterans Wall. It didn't have strings attached for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and wind energy for buildings and building greenways as part of the process. I think if you want to go after different grant money, there might be other opportunities out there for that versus this. I mean, and that was, I don't know if that's a state grant or federal grant, I'm not sure, but again, that was something that we passed and it was spoken about in general office on
The tribal funds.
tribal funds.
Part of the ARPA money.
So again, that's just, there's other, in my opinion, other opportunities out there, but this is just one where I read the details on this because it existed and knew.
Mr. Becker?
Call the question.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Oh, this is to approve it.
No, this is
I'm
the question.
sorry.
No, this is to call the
Yeah,
question.
Sorry, to call the question, yeah. Aye. All right. Any opposed? Okay, great. On to the original motion. All in favor of approving this, say aye. All opposed?
No.
Motion fails unanimously. All right. We'll be planning for the county funds then. Or maybe we can find a different grant. Okay, the next one is a resolution that I had drafted up and worked with Mr. Long and Mr. Sittler. Passed around this resolution, and I'll let you read it, and then we can add it to the record here afterwards. But I'll just speak to the purpose of it. Well, just to be correct here, I entertain a motion to approve or motion to discuss.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
All righty, so I'd like to get included. Oh, here. So doing a little bit of digging,
Would you not get one?
what I've noticed throughout the county is that we've got different departments providing services that are, and there's nothing evil going on here, but we got different organizations within the county providing services to other organizations within the county. And it's not exactly clear how much funding is being spent on some of these things. One, and this has happened, there's no single offender. I think there's some discussion on radios and how quickly those are getting paid out and how that's accounted for through EMA. There are some questions on emergency services, providing support for games, for football games to the schools. There are several others that I could probably come up with, and the purpose of this, if you read it, it basically requires the county to operate like a business. We have different, the county, all the departments are essentially a cost center. And so if Mr. Ellis, our highway director, highway superintendent, is to pave a location for the sheriff's office should pay for that. Now, it does give, we can understand that there's a little bit of efficiency for taking care of something small, so we do have I did propose a $25,000 kind of fudge factor in there. But basically anything that should come to this commission should be billed. So, that's the purpose of this, and it has some teeth to it, because it would direct the law director, or excuse me, the finance director, not to pay for those services if we found that, we spent $50,000 to pay something, or $50,000 for EMS at one location that wouldn't be accounted for properly, then wouldn't be approved. So that's the purpose of this. Any other questions? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item C is, follows from legislative here, and this was just a discussion of managing the opioid settlement funds, but I think I don't know if there's any action we can take on this yet, because that resolution needs to go all the way to commission, full commission, correct, Mr. Lee?
Yes, sir.
So I don't know that there's any action we need to take on item C, but we will leave it and move into old business next time, because I'll be making that appointment, according to the parameters of that, should it pass. The next item, item D, is just discussion, and I want to bring this up. I don't know, Ms. Sittler, I may ask your opinion here. I've spoken with various folks about just kind of upward trend of spend in the election commission and what has driven that. And really, it seems to me to come down to two things. And it's arguable what the causality was. But a couple things changed from 2019 to 2020. And you'll note if you do a year-over-year analysis that our spend trajectory went up. Those two things were, one, at least some initial movement toward, although we did not complete, convenience voting. And the second one was the move from 12 to 24 voting districts. So, Ms. Sittler, I would like to understand before we make any as we're moving into this budget season, to understand something of a grid of, if you think about the x-axis being 12 versus 24 districts, and the y-axis for it being convenience voting versus not convenience voting, what's our bang for our buck? Ms. Swan, you and I have talked about this. Would you recommend an ad hoc committee to this, or just kind of have the law director put something together to understand? I'm just trying to understand what that amount would look like, so we can get some numbers, some projections in front of us.
This seems to me like it would be a state survey of how it's being conducted elsewhere, and I would almost say you need an ad hoc, just get those numbers together, crunch them, and whatever works best for the commission.
Mr. Beckman?
Remind me, how many precincts were created when we moved from 12 to 24?
We added, I don't remember how many.
I think we added 3, if I'm not mistaken, and that's a little hazy in my mind, but I'm remembering 3 additional precincts simply because when we expanded the number of districts, you have to have a polling place within so many miles of the population, and I think we ended up having to, if I'm remembering that correctly, I think it's 3.
So
Which means additional workers.
Yeah, 3 is the number I remember as well, but, okay. So that's pretty easy to identify, right? The convenience voting is probably the trickier one, right?
Yeah. And I think that's probably right, like it would be who's used convenience voting and who hasn't, and then how are those counties doing?
What's if I may?
Go ahead.
What's the status of the convenience voting? I was told that couldn't do it and got delayed because of secured and reliable internet service at all the precincts, and until that wasn't in place, we couldn't do convenience voting. Is that what other folks have heard as well, or does anyone know any different information?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if anybody in this room does.
So can we just make a decision to just not move forward that way? I mean, you started off conversation, I guess, from a funding standpoint.
Yeah, that's right. It's just about trying to understand the numbers. I mean,
You can rescind the convenience voting, can't you, but you can't change the districts until the next election.
that's correct.
So right now, that's really,
That's not correct.
you can change the districts now?
You can redistrict every year if you wanted to.
So you could redistrict the commissioners back together and get
You
rid
can-
of the three?
My understanding, you can redraw the lines, but you can't create or eliminate districts. But I may be wrong.
I know it doesn't have to be a census year to
Yeah.
redistrict.
True.
So, which means you could go back to 12 districts versus 24, which is an instant cost savings.
And the convenience voting, you can.
Well,
rescind
convenience,
that.
Well, we think, I mean, I spoke to Mr. Emling on this, and he made one comment. I'm going to said, well, what if we just went back to 12 districts? He said, well, a lot of the spend happened because you made a change. Yeah, we added 3, but that's not gonna change that much. And you go back, you're just gonna spend a lot more money again. And the truth is, I don't know.
Postage is what they're probably correct.
Yeah, that's right.
You gotta mail all the new
You
districts.
gotta remail everybody, so there's.
There's one-time cost in the background.
So the point is, there's no hard numbers to any of this, and I wouldn't wanna see anybody making any kind of rash decisions without some kind of analysis. So I mean, if you're thinking an ad hoc would be the way to do it, I've got some, I think I can just appoint an ad hoc, right?
Yep.
That's what I'll do.
I like the ad hoc, Matt, because I can tell you that my business partner who lives in Cottontown lives less than a mile away from the precinct that was closest to him, but he had to travel 6 or 7 miles to his precinct. And I'm not sure that a lot of sensibility went into selecting the precincts. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs of the districts and things, but I'm sure that there are ways to simplify it.
Well, and just to be clear, this is, we're not trying to tell the election commission where to pick and what to do at that level. It's just about getting some numbers here to make a smart decision at the.
Yeah, I understand, but things like that may affect things.
We need a motion for this?
I don't think we need to. I'm just gonna appoint an ad hoc. That's it. And I'll email this body with that. Okay, so next item is a approval of $20,000 of federal tribal funds for improvements to a veterans park. I entertain a motion to approve.
Very good. I got a question, point of order, maybe?
You put that under item E under report of committee chairman's APC authorization.
Oh, I'm
Yes, you did.
sorry.
So that's
I've
what
flipped them on my.
Yeah, the county mayor B is the veterans part.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I've got notes all over the place. Yeah, you're correct. So we'll move here to item E, which is the Bearcat.
Motion approved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I have some questions.
Go ahead.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know. My understanding is part of the FEMA process, since this is a prohibited vehicle currently, meaning the county can't have it, is that this is a two-step process. One is to approve it, to move forward to the grant process. And then the second part would be once it's approved and we go through the grant application, it comes back to committee and the
That's
commission
right.
for a second approval reading, once we can read the contract.
That's
Yep, and then
correct. This is and I spoke to Mr.
This is
Weiser
just
about
approval,
this.
just say, yes, we want to move. It's an extra layer the federal government has required of us that normally we wouldn't have.
That's right. We are giving Mr. Widener the ability to
Pursue,
the grant.
correct. But knowing that we haven't fully, I mean, I received an email from
We
the
need a
commission.
resolution for it. I mean, it's gonna have to be a resolution allowing him to do that.
Correct. But I'm just understanding the process. One is, this is just the first order of approving it so that we can begin that process and discussion. And then the second part is, once we approve it, then they go through the grant process and come back to us for the appropriation, for the approval of, once we actually get to read the details of the contract, such as this energy efficiency thing we read. Right now, we don't have that exactly.
That's right. And I wanna get ahead of it. So go ahead, because I'm gonna get in queue here. I got some amendments.
Well, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify this is a two-step process,
Yes,
not a
that's
one-step process. So it's not like this is getting approved tonight. This is
That's
approved to
right.
move forward tonight.
That's right.
To explore and go through the process.
That's correct.
Okay. That's
It's
my
very
first question.
specifically, it is an approval for Mr. Widener to pursue the grant.
Is that the limited scope?
That's
Because the
limited scope.
federal government won't let them get it without a
Correct.
resolution.
Correct.
According
That's
to-
why I was-
because of the administration's new rules on this piece of.
There were some questions and confusions people had, thinking
Yeah.
it was not a two-step process, and I was pretty sure, but I just wanted to ask
It
for
is
the record
two-step.
that is my understanding is a two-step process, and what we're doing is approving to say, yes, we're gonna let them
And
get
and
this
just so
process.
it's not just me saying
may not
this,
get it.
Mr. Widener, I'm gonna spin the rules very briefly. Mr. Widener, is what we were saying correct, is a two-step
That's
process?
correct, yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. We're gonna come back here, and we may ask some more questions in a minute, but we're on the record here, two-step process.
Good, that was my main question.
So I would like to get in queue here and propose a couple amendments or additions to any resolution to approve this. One stipulation is that this vehicle shall not be utilized without a court order that is publicly available. We have seen the federal government issue court orders under seal. And so this shall not be utilized without a court order that is publicly visible. 2, shall not be utilized to enforce any action counter to either the U.S. or Tennessee constitutions. 3, shall not be utilized for any parades or public displays. I would make a motion to amend the resolution to approve this with these 3 stipulations.
Second.
Any discussion of those amendments?
Public displays, what do you mean they cannot bring it to a school? Like, you know, there's a program that they have for kids, I don't know if they still do it, where kids can go view a police car, a fire engine, so they wouldn't even be able to
That's
use
right.
that for that.
Parades?
No parades.
No parades.
No parades. Use it for its intended tactical purpose.
And we can stop it any time prior to signing the contract if we don't like the terms.
Yes.
Okay.
But what we're saying here is that, I mean, you know, what we're really talking about here is that nobody trusts the federal government, right? Everybody says that, so what we're saying is, we're gonna put this right up in the open, that we're not gonna use it for these things that federal government we don't trust you about. We're not gonna use it for these, and hey, if they give us the money, great.
Till you appropriate it, you can stop it.
Mr. Becker?
What was the part about the seal or non-seal?
Judicial, need a court order. Basically, can't be used to do things like red flag laws. Need a court order.
So is there a court order? Would a court order be in place for all the true intentional usages?
I'll suspend the rules real quick and just to confirm that.
Is that
I'm sorry.
the requirement for a court order to be in place? Would that hinder a true usage other than?
Yeah, that's what Brandon and I were just talking about. If we get a hostage situation, if we had it now, we had a hostage situation, we had an active shooter, we had a barricaded suspect, anything that this is used for, would we have to go to a judge to get a court order to respond? I'm asking because I don't know, and if it does, I think that will hinder
Very much so.
response.
I mean, even a suicidal subject that, you know, needs help, anything. I mean, how do we get a court order to rescue somebody that's down?
So the team deploys in this like a fire department responds to a house fire.
So here's what I'm trying to mitigate against. I don't like Jeremy Mansfield. And
Is that on the record?
Jeremy Mansfield has I say that Jeremy Mansfield has his home taken hostage. This happens all the time, swatting. How that's what I'm trying to mitigate. And I know there's no way to perfectly mitigate against that, right? But like,
That's not gonna stop us from going, we just
With
had
what
this
you
in White
have.
House. We just carried out a mission like that in White House. We went up there, literally the family was taken hostage by their 14-year-old son by an assault rifle. So we went up there, we literally lit up the house, we got on a PA, said, family come out, 'cause we knew there was something wrong. The family came out, we shook hands, apologized to them. We're still gonna do our job, whether we get this piece of equipment or not.
yeah, fair
You
enough.
know, but when we go do our job, we would like to be safe doing it.
Let me maybe just ask directly, what would you recommend? I mean, you've seen you've seen, I think, the conversations online and nope, everybody wants you to have the proper protection of the equipment. What would you recommend is a reasonable way to state that this won't be used in ways which are counter to the Tennessee Constitution or the U.S. Constitution, things that are...
It's actually stated in 207-02, the prohibition document, which addresses civil rights violations directly. It also requires that the sheriff's office have a community policing and a community constitutional policing policy in place, which they do, which covers that. So those policies, departmental policies, are in place, and then within the document, there are there's guidance in that as well that covers what you're speaking of.
Well, because I do get the point about wanting to, I mean, if you have an immediate, so if there's an immediate threat, and forgive my ignorance, so if there's an immediate threat now, you're not gonna wait for a court order, you're gonna.
So if they execute a search warrant, they've got to get a search warrant signed by a judge. But in this situation, you don't have time to get a court order to respond.
Mr. Jones, I know you've been waiting there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A possible amendment could be just add the language in there that it's for an immediate emergency situation.
I mean,
where
that's
life
gonna be.
or life is.
That's in there.
It's in the document.
It's in the document.
At the same token, on the same line, it would go a great deal to get those using this vehicle to settle the minds of a lot of the public to come out with a statement saying that it will not be used for those things, because we could put that stipulation in there, but enforcing it, I think the public wants to hear from the people that are going to be using it, the Sheriff's Department, the SWAT team, people like that, to give the reassurance that it won't be misused.
Mr. Mansfield, thank you, sir.
So, just respectfully, I disagree a little bit, the EMA director on what, when you're reading what the federal government is putting out for their guidelines, when the federal government is the one that says, current federal government supports in many law enforcement officers and citizens' opinions, unconstitutional red flag laws, which are unconstitutional. In 2020, February 2020, I brought forward, it was a sanctuary, Second Amendment Sanctuary County resolution, where what happened, it started in the state of Virginia, where the governor and a Democratic governor and a Democratic state legislature passed red flag laws, which are inherently unconstitutional. And the sheriffs and the county commissions of the state of Virginia, a majority of them, I think it was like 78, at least 75% of them, as of January of 2020, passed, because it was in the fall of 2019 that the Virginia legislature passed this. They passed these Second Amendment Sanctuary County resolutions is where the movement started, because the local law enforcement as well as the local governing bodies were operating under the doctrine of the lesser magistrate, which says when a higher form of government basically is doing something that is unlawful, meaning like unconstitutional under our form of government, or illegal or even immoral, it is up to the lower magistrate or the lower form of government to stand up and say, no, we're not going to do that. And so what happened in Virginia was those legislative bodies of the counties as well as the sheriffs in those counties said, you can pass, and the problem comes into people what you define as a law. There's a lot of statutes and laws that exist in Tennessee that are unconstitutional, straight up. It happens every day. Just because a law exists does not make it statutorily constitutional. It just doesn't. And so the citizens have a serious concern, and rightfully I was thankful for that movement when that happened in 2020, because these sheriffs, and as we all know, the sheriff is the highest elected law enforcement in the land. They can tell the feds to just, forget about it, you're not coming to our county. They can tell the Army you're not coming in. I mean, because they're elected constitutionally, so they have more authority and power than people realize. So I understand on one side the importance of our law enforcement being the first line of defense, but the concern here is when we're reading a federal document talking about, well, the feds can't do this, it's just hogwash in my opinion, because the feds are the ones violating our Constitution every day with things like that, what they say, with unconstitutional things like red flag laws, or even just not even adhering to the spirit and intent of the Second Amendment as our framers intended, as most people agree and talk about. So I think the spirit of what Commissioner Shope is putting in this and wanting assurances for citizens, and I've had these same things brought to me, and a lot of people, I mean, that, I support you guys and getting this. I'm going to vote for this to move forward for the grant tonight. I told you guys I would. But I also share concerns of when it comes, and I know there's individual members who said we'll push the Bearcat into the river before we use it to do red flags law confiscations. But that's not the policy of a public office such as the Sheriff's Department or the Chief of Police. Whereas these sanctuary county resolutions, it was these governing bodies saying, we will not do this. The sheriff saying, we will not do this. And I think what we're looking, the spirit of what Commissioner Schoaf is saying with his amendment is that we as a county will not use this for this purpose. So what kind of bumpers can we put around this as far as a safeguard? And such as if it's, because our state legislature, people are like, I don't see any legislation for red flag laws. Our legislators are talking about it right now.
I've got some changes I think that'll.
Okay, well, good. But it's important because this is an important issue for citizens, and it's important to the spirit of what we're talking about, especially with the hyperbolic emotionalism surrounding this topic and what's happening in Nashville and the overshadowing of 6 people being murdered by a crazy person in Nashville, and now it's turned into this separate national dialogue. Let's just ban guns and take from everybody, which is the stupidest thing ever. And it's not about that, as we all know. And then so as you see, when it comes to federal strings attached, and we have some people here that want to suspend them. I talked to Commissioner Schoaf about it, talking about that I guess the LESO program for the state, what's possible for acquiring equipment like this without federal strings attached, because that is the biggest problem. As you just saw, we rejected something with federal strings attached because of some crazy, social programs and initiatives that are just not based in reality or even what they're intended for. And so I support what you're saying because we're not going to use it for illegal search and seizure, basically, for unconstitutional red flag
I think
laws.
there's a way to word this that'll still help them.
Trying not to be dead horses, but this is a passionate subject of mine and of my constituents. In all fairness, I represent Millersville, and I don't know if you've watched the news lately, but Millersville Police is not exactly, the department has had problems. I mean, they've been before I guess it's called the Post, and the Post is, I can't remember, it's the Police Officer Standards and Training Commission, and had negative things said about it. So there's a lot of people in my district that have problems with, they don't trust law enforcement agencies, not law enforcement personnel, but agencies specifically. And I've not heard a commitment, and I asked the sheriff for a commitment in the sheriff's office and not received one back, that the sheriff's department would do 2 things, that they would come on public record speaking out against red flag laws, and that they would not enforce red flag laws, even though they were passed by the state legislature. I've not received that commitment from the sheriff's department yet. And also, sidebar for constitutional carry, the Sheriff's Association, unfortunately, and law enforcement have been the biggest opponents of constitutional carry and the expansion of Second Amendment rights in the state of Tennessee. And that's just a fact. And so citizens want guarantees that our local law enforcement, not individual members, but as agencies, are going to support the expansion of citizens being able to protect themselves when our peace officers are asking for us to help them protect themselves. Citizens are wanting that same thing. And so these are all, I'm glad this discussion's coming up. I know it's been stressful and emotional, and I think we're in a good place. We all support our law enforcement. The citizen comments that talked about earlier didn't appreciate the rhetoric of just because you question something, or you might want to have an alternate view, you therefore are against EMS, or you're against teachers. That's BS, and I'm tired of it too. And it's wrong. And if you're participating in that dialogue, you need to change the way you're talking, because that's not true. What we're trying to do here is to represent all citizens and all taxpayers. Law enforcement are taxpayers, teachers are taxpayers as well. And it's being sensitive to the dialogue, and I'm not talking about some, being sensitive on the sense of like some hippie commune type stuff, and Marxism and all that kind of stuff. I'm just talking about these are constitutionally law-abiding citizens who have been labeled by their federal government as domestic terrorists because they believe in the Second Amendment, because they believe in the military, they homeschool their kids. That has happened already from the Department of Homeland Security, that people like me have been labeled a domestic terrorist. I homeschool my kids. And I don't want that crap happening in Sumner County, and I don't approve anything that has strings attached for anything for that in Sumner County. And I don't trust the government. I have a healthy distrust of the government myself. And so, and that's, I'm speaking on behalf of my constituents as well, but that's my, my personal opinion. When And I know one of these grants, it was emailed out today, it literally lists one of the things, it talks about, part of the requirement of this, using these things is for domestic terrorism, combating domestic violent extremism. Well, according to the federal government, I've been labeled a domestic violent extremist because I homeschool my kids or have Christian-based biblical values. So you have to understand the context and the greater narrative here of what the psychology is behind when we're really looking at things where the federal government is attached, that do we want this in Sumner County? And I'm like, I don't want the federal. We had Cameron Sexton talking about how do we uncouple the state funding for education and getting rid of the federal government out of any of our educational initiatives, which I think is a great thing. But so those conversations are happening at the state level, but we're having this conversation at the county level, which is appropriate because these kind of discussions are happening. So again, sorry to go on so long about this, but I think it's important just to frame that of why I seconded your amendment for those types of issues. I understand the initial response, because one thing I know this is being a requirement of this, I believe, is for FEMA related things. Like there's a flood. Are you going to have to get a court order to use this for a flood to rescue people who are on the street? I understand that's the promise of this. So I'm open to amendments changing that because I think it needs to be
Mr.
reworded.
Harrison was in queue, and then I'll make a change to my amendment because I think it'll satisfy all parties here, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we approve this, what's the timeline?
It depends on how quickly they turn the contract around, and that's another question I talked to Chairman Shelf about today. I need to know what the review process for the contract is to go back to the county mayor for signature. So does that need to come back, or can that go to the county attorney and go back to the mayor for signature, which has been done since '99? 2001 is when it really.
I don't think that there would be, Mr. Chipwood, do you think there would be any change to that would go to you first and then to the county mayor?
No, I don't see a problem with that, but then it becomes a budget issue again,
It's
is
gotta
what
come
I
to
It
understood.
would come back.
Yeah, they come back.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
we totally get
Right.
that.
Yeah, I'm not asking for any money.
No,
And
that's
I'm
right.
just saying
And when
prior to
would-
execution.
That's right.
Right, okay.
When would we expect delivery of such an item?
They're a year out after order. This is the most purchased item in the nation right now under law enforcement terrorism protection, that portion of the grant.
So let me, Mr. Harrison, do you have any other questions? So I'm gonna change. So I had three amendments here. I'm gonna change them. The first one is the one that was given you pause, and I understand the reason why. So maybe I'll change that. I would, if you're amenable to it, change that first one to just simply say, shall not be utilized to enforce sealed, non-emergent, sealed orders to include red flag laws.
I agree.
Will that will that prevent you from responding to an emergent? Because I
Can you read it again,
specifically
please?
call out shall not be utilized shall not be utilized to enforce non-emergent sealed orders to include red flag laws.
Judge Bland.
And I saw Judge Bland raise his hand up there. So from like an emergent response point of view, is there any issue with that?
I don't know that I understand the purpose of it being sealed or not sealed.
Basically,
address.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Klein.
So basically what in a sealed and unsealed warrant is for the protection of the community more than it is anything else. A judge has the prerogative one way or the other to seal it or not seal it, and that's the judge's prerogative. It's not anybody else's. That's the judge's prerogative to seal it. It's not law enforcement.
Understood.
It's my duty. It's my job to determine whether to make that sealed or not sealed. And so if it's involving domestic terrorism or it's involving terrorism in general, I'm not going to make that public. I'm going to make that private because I don't want somebody in the clerk's office picking up the phone or somebody who happens to just be visiting the clerk's office when it's filed and go, hey, there's a sealed warrant out here for you because you're getting ready, that bomb you've been working on, they're getting ready to come and raid your house. That's a problem. So that's something you need to consider. Another thing is they're gonna, if you're gonna require them to get a warrant, which I think you took out, are you gonna stop my court, or stop Judge Gay's court, or anybody judge's court? Come in running in, says you gotta stop your trial, I've got an emergency situation, I need you to sign a search
No,
warrant.
that was the argument for taking that out,
Right,
which
and so-
I did understand that, but I mean, what we're getting here, we're not saying, no, we're not saying you can't continue to do those things, we're
Sure.
saying,
But
if
I'm
you
just
wanna
saying,
use this piece of equipment.
it's not their decision whether it's sealed or not.
Understood
It's the
that.
judge's. it's-
Totally understood.
It's the judge's decision to seal it, and the only way that you're gonna seal it is if you've got, I can give you some examples where you might have somebody sealed, if you've got somebody that you receive that's downloading or exporting massive amounts of child pornography, you're gonna seal that.
But do you need
Until
a bear- but do you
the
need a bear
execution of the
category?
warrant, then it becomes public.
Yeah.
After the execution, it's just prior, it's sealed prior to it. And depending on what it was returned, we're not gonna have availability of a bunch of child porn
Yeah, I get
for
it.
the public, so, I mean, that's what you have on the return. And that sometimes they're sealed in that, just because of the nature of what's recovered.
I mean, and I'm just trying to be honest here, because we're having, we're having this.
I'm playing devil's advocate.
No,
here,
I
because I want you to
understand.
consider that when you make these amendments.
I
agree
totally
with
understand.
what Mr. Mansfield's saying. I agree with what you're saying about the enforcement of certain laws. I don't think that's the intent of this, based
Well,
on just what
I know it's not the intent, but as a
I understand.
commissioner would say, out on the floor, words matter.
I totally
So,
understand.
And we,
Mr. Chairman?
yeah, go ahead.
Can I read a section out of, this is
Yeah.
out of FEMA 207-02-002. This is in E4, actually E3. All recipients and subrecipient personnel who will use, authorize, or direct use of accepted or controlled equipment are required to have an annual appropriate and relevant training of the First Amendment, religious assembly, which is what that is. Fourth, unreasonable search, and then 14th Amendment, civil rights amendments, training on how to protect the civil rights and civil liberties of those in the surrounding community where the accepted or controlled equipment will be used. Is vital to ensure that the use of the accepted or controlled equipment complies with the constitutional standards and the protection of civil rights and civil liberties. Training objectives should define and explain relevant concepts and demonstrate the application of such concepts through equipment-based scenarios to show appropriate and proper use of accepted or controlled equipment by both law enforcement, non-law enforcement personnel, and the negative effects and consequences of misuse.
So I'll make a motion, here's what I'll do, so that we can move on past this, because everybody wants to, we think the gist here is that we want you to have the equipment you need. I'll strike that first one, because it's gonna go to the full commission anyway, and I would like to work with you folks for some language here that will, so that we're not wasting everybody's time tonight, but that will
Mr. Chair.
address the public's thoughts here. Go ahead.
I think a word that's worked for hundreds of years in the law enforcement field is the words exigent circumstances. I think that would cover everything that you're looking for. I think it would cover rescues. I think it would cover suicidal people. I think it would cover barricaded suspects. I think it would cover just about everything you're looking for. And that's something that's been covered in the arrest or person who's been suspected of, or there's probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed and there's fresh pursuit. It's one of the words, or the two words that they use in order for us in law enforcement to be able to make entry into a home without a warrant, is the words exigent circumstances. And I think those words fit in what you're trying to say there.
And they may well, I'd have to research it, so I think for now, as opposed to going down that one for here, just go with those second two. I just changed the amendment to change those second two, and then I'm happy to work with you on that first one.
I'll agree to that change, and that Mr. Pierce was here for the Elliott.
Oh.
So, just to tell us briefly about that.
Well, the rules are suspended if we want 3 minutes.
Just to take a couple minutes, just to explain the
This is
LISO
for an
program.
alternative funding source,
This
right?
is for an alternative funding source for the Bearcat versus taking money from the federal government. There's a program out there called the LISO program. It's actually state funded, And what it is you get equipment from the DOD. Yes, it's federal, DOD is federal, but you get the equipment that's handed down to the state from the DOD. It includes equipment ranging from 100,000-pound cranes down to small arms. You take that equipment, they give you that equipment after approval through the LISO program, and after a year's use of that, you're allowed to sell it. It's free to sell it. You can actually make money off that. You can actually set that aside in the sheriff's office budget for whatever you want to use it for, versus having to use money out of your budget to do anything. You can use this LISO money where you sold these pieces of equipment for anything. And I'm gonna let Brian speak for just a second, because Brian is the former chief of police, actually still the state chief of police of the Ridgetown Police Department. He's used this program, so he knows it best. I'm gonna yield to him because he knows this program best after having used it.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what he just said. Basically, if you run the program right, you can realize money from it. It's not what it's actually set up for, but in the 3 years that I was there, we realized a little over $2 million from LASO equipment. You have to have a need for the equipment. We were building a new firing range, police station and whatnot, so I got D7 bulldozers, road graders, stuff like that. But like he said, once you get that equipment, and it all has to be approved through the state before you get it. You have to have a reason to get it. You can't just go crazy and get whatever you want. But once it gets turned over to you, after 1 year, it comes off your books, you own it. You can burn it, you can roll it off in the creek, sell it, whatever you want to do with it. But, you know, if you run the program right, you get this equipment. When it comes off the books, you get equipment to replace it, then you sell it, do whatever you want with it. But I took my budget from what it was in 2010. When I left there in 2019, it was actually cheaper, and I had added 2 positions. We bought cars, $192,000 worth of cars at no cost to the city. Like I said, when I left there, $250,000 in the bank. The only thing with those funds is you can only use them for the sheriff's department or the police department, whatever the LASO, where you're at. It can only be used at that department. And it can be used on budgeted items.
So that's super helpful, and I think that's definitely something we can consider. I don't think that that this precludes us, because again, it's a 2-step process, so I appreciate that. And
I would like to have another time to come back and spend a little bit more time talking about this LISO program, because Brian's got a whole PowerPoint presentation that he can make on the LISO program, as well as he knows the man who directs that program for the state of Tennessee. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a way to, one, get the sheriff's office good equipment, functional equipment, and it's not used equipment, maybe just a little bit, but it's overstock equipment from the DOD. They buy 10 D8 dozers, only use 8, they sell 2.
They sit in a yard.
Correct.
I'm tracking. Thank you guys for that.
And I totally support the Bearcat, but I totally support finding alternative ways to pay for it.
Okay,
Thank you,
so,
Jeremy.
thank y'all. I'm gonna go ahead and move us back. I suspended the rules.
Just one more quick question. Under whose ultimate authority would this piece of equipment fall under? You or Sonny?
It's the ERT, the Emergency Response Team. It'll go to them, when it gets here, it'll go to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? So, we're on the amendment. It's just the 2.
What, can you repeat the 2?
Yeah, I will. Shall not be utilized to enforce any action counter to either the U.S. or Tennessee constitutions, and shall not be utilized for parades or public display. That's the amendment. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now we're on the main to approve it with those 2 amendments. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you, John.
Moved off the Bearcat. I believe Now I'm messing up my own notes here. Do you remember, did I put, the archives in my report? No, I
It
put
was
it.
C under the
You did.
mayor.
Yeah.
C under your
It's C under the
report.
mayor.
Coming to the report.
C under the mayor.
Okay, so don't, Mr. Mayor, go ahead, on the replacement air conditioner.
All right, so I'm finishing up the report. I've got the jail that I've got to finish up, and I'll have that report ready for you soon. And with the removal of the chiller and the passage, with the removal of the chiller, we should be somewhere around 800,000. Once we add the new ones in, I'll have a better number for you next month, and I'll email that out prior to. I know we've got this later on down on the agenda item under old business, but just to let you know, the bid on the chiller is delayed. We've had to extend the bid to April 25th. And the reason being is that the pad that we put it on, that you see the chiller on now, is too small for the new model of chillers. So we're gonna have to figure out where we can expand, because on one side's parking lot, the other side's generator, and the other side's parking lot. And then we got a little hill on one side that we're thinking we're gonna have to dig out to expand that pad. So we've extended the bidding till 4/25, and we'll report back then. Let's see, we had a major meltdown at the jail, a sewer issue, had to do an emergency PO for about 40,000, trying to get that mitigated. They are in the process of getting it fixed. I think they've got it stopped, contained, all that. Now they're piecing it back together. They had to tear up flooring and all of that good stuff. So that was a mess. Sales ratio. I don't know if David's talked about this, but sales ratio's out. David, do you want to talk about that, and I'll be quiet? Or?
It came back at about 61%, and it was, I believe, 80-some% last year. But the issue with the sales ratio is it's 100% the year reappraisal. The year after, and then the year after that, because we're on a 5-year recycle, they do a equalization ratio, and then the year after that they do one. What that is, they take what the average house real property value is to the market value, and they adjust down 2 items. The 2 items is your personal property and the public utilities, and it's by, I think, a court agreement with the state of Tennessee, because the railroads made a suit, I don't know, several years ago. But we did get it back. The ratio brought down your personal property tax values by over 20%. So what that'll do is your next year property tax growth you usually see in revenues. What I'm looking right now, you're probably somewhere below 1%, because the ratio took a big chunk out of a lot of your growth.
Make it a little simpler. Basically, what it's telling you is that you're about 39% underappraised going into a reappraisal year. So that's kind of where we'll be with the reappraisal.
Your tax rate will go down significantly. You'll probably have one of the lowest tax rates in the area. Yep. By far.
So let's move on to.
But I mean, just to be clear, for purely budgetary purposes, it's net, right? I mean, it's gonna reset.
Well, usually you have no, it doesn't, but you usually have a 1.5–2% growth. It's gonna net against your growth. You actually lose that. So basically your new property, your personal property, they have to May 20th to file. I think it's May 20th. They'll file your personal property, and they have a long period of time to actually appeal it. But what happens is they'll take the gross amount, and then you apply the ratio. The ratio last year was in the 80s. The ratio this year's in the 60s, so you lost over 20%.
Tracking that, but the whole idea here is that it's supposed to be revenue neutral, right?
No. This particular thing is not.
Not on this part.
And your reappraisal is not even truly revenue neutral either.
Well, I know that, I mean, I know you can't be perfect
Right.
on that,
But no, it's not revenue neutral in any form or fashion.
So what's the impact then?
It's going to be, you're going to lose, usually your personal property, and I have the percentage back, and I think it goes up probably on average about 4%. So your personal property growth from last year is going to go up 4%, but then we're going to gross it down by 20-some%. So you're going to lose a fair amount of your personal property and a fair amount of your public utilities. It's not going to affect your real property. So that's why I'm saying your growth, what I'm looking at right now, and I'm still waiting for some updated numbers from the assessor's office. He gave me some the other day, but he'll give me some more. We're looking to be somewhere under 1% probably on that growth on your property tax.
That's.
Much lower
that's
than
what we're-
inflation.
Got it.
Any
That's-
normal year, you're 1.5 to 2, so you lost a lot of money from the
Yep,
equalization.
That's what I'm getting after. Okay, thank you.
A lot.
Sorry for that.
Oh, no problem. I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that number. Next item on the agenda was the Veterans Park. A group of veterans came to me with a need. This is on county property. Basically, I showed the PowerPoint last.
I move to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? Anything new? All in favor?
No, I don't know what it is.
Go ahead.
What is it?
Okay, basically what we're doing, the wall is starting to separate. The big wall that has the memorial bricks in it is starting to separate. So we've got a company that's gonna come in and shore all that up. And then we're also gonna install a 35-foot flagpole. It's just the American flag, not those 5 that are in front, or there's more than that now, 7, I think. It's just the one American flag that's in the back. We're gonna raise it up 35 feet, and we'll have a bigger flag up there. And then the third thing is we're doing some irrigation for them. We're just expanding the irrigation that's there to get to their other garden. We're doing all that internally. The original ask was $28,000. We've been kind of whittling away at this a little bit, and I think we're going to be okay around 21, 22,000. So just trying to find some cost savings where we can.
Mr. Chairman, at the meeting last week, we had talked about possibly a less expensive flagpole that the mayor was going to do. Was there any?
That's what we're looking at.
Okay.
So 22,000?
Yeah, 22.
22,000.
Is it from the tribal funds?
And it comes from the tribal, the $100,000.
Yeah.
We want to consider it flow through too, so we won't need a second reading.
Yeah. So I would, actually, I don't think we typically do this, but I would amend my motion. Do we need a second reading on this?
I'm going to consider it flow through because there's a 50,000 we've received and 100 we're going to receive on tribal funds that can be used for anything.
Yeah, got it.
It's not necessarily tied to this, but if the committee's okay, I'll consider it flow through. If not, then it'll need a waiving of the second reading if somebody objects to it.
I will amend my motion, or I'd like to amend my motion to second degrees to consider this 22,000 flow through funds. I don't know who the second was. Mr. Smith.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll second.
Any other discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Sorry, Tim, just trying to move.
Thank you. The last one that I have is the archives building. General operations had moved that we start the process. We're going to need, and they outlined some parameters of what they would like to see. So we're going to forward that to the architectural engineer, let them scope that out for us. We'll bring that back to general ops. But having said that, there is $450,000 that needs to be rolled over from last year's budget. Not that this project's going to cost $450,000, but if we can roll that over, if we have an overage on the jail roof, once those numbers come back, we'll have the monies available.
Not to speak for or against the rolling, but one thing I would recommend if we're going to move 450 is the $450,000 came from a direct appropriation grant that's in your county general fund. That money can be used for anything. You have $2.9 million available in your capital project, so whatever you roll or appropriate, I would recommend doing that from your capital project. That way you can keep these unrestricted funds completely unrestricted. These roofs will qualify for capital, which is restricted by the property tax levy. So right now, if you reappropriate this 450, you're going to put restriction back on funds you can use for anything. We can just necessarily use it over here. Not for or against or the amount, but I'm saying
Here's one thing I'd like to,
advantageous.
we spoke about this earlier, and I've been talking about it earlier. I'll propose this, I'll make this, I guess I'll make a motion to do this, to move forward with the funds needed as passed through for general ops, so let's handle that separately. So I would just make a motion, what was that amount for?
Well,
We don't know yet.
we don't know yet because
Do we have a ballpark?
we know the parapet would be around 30,000, but we haven't got any costs on
Can we
removing
roll-
the handrail.
Can we roll like, I mean, can we get a?
I would think 50
Okay.
would do it, John.
So
Is
I
it
would,
gonna meet the architecture?
I'll move to roll forward $50,000.
If we roll 50, we're gonna hit into the realm where any modifications on the building over a certain dollar threshold requires an architect.
Okay, what's the threshold?
50.
So if we
Let's-
stayed
48. I would move to roll forward $48,000.
If you can do the complete project under, and it doesn't require modifying the building. It says if it doesn't require modification.
Yeah, see, the problem is, if we're gonna remove those railings, we're gonna get into a modification. You know, I looked at doing two different projects, getting the railings off and coming behind it, using two different companies.
So what was the specific thing that came out of Gen Ops? I mean, because I kind of assumed that when it comes from Gen Ops, we have a plan.
We agreed to go with an EPDM vertical surface on the parapet walls inside and to pursue removing the handrail. I did not.
Do you have, I mean, so specific to that, do we have any kind of estimate for, okay, take the handrail out, just the vertical walls?
The vertical walls were 30,000.
Okay.
Are we considering structural changes is the question. If we consider a structural change to the building, we're gonna need an architect. If it's non-structural and it's over 50, we're gonna need an architect.
I would think this is non-structural.
What's the?
Removing a handrail.
Who has the definitive on that?
Well, you're not.
It's kind of.
You don't need to run calculations on getting rid of weight.
Right, that's what I'm saying. If it's according to what it is.
And so this should not be a structural thing at all.
All right.
It's our building.
Yeah,
We ought to be
if-
able to define that ourselves.
So here's the motion is again, if we can get a second. I just want to move forward with what was specifically.
You have your second.
How
All
about we
right, great.
attach the statute to the resolution for you guys to look at on the floor?
That
That
would
way,
be
make
fine.
sure if there's any questions, the commission
That'll be
can
fine. So
make
at
their
least we can get
determination on the
moving
floor.
that. All right. Any other discussion on just what's needed for the verticals? $30,000 for that.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously.
Are we funding it from two questions now? Capital Projects Fund?
Yes, probably should. Yeah.
Number two, do you want to waive the second reading?
Yes.
Yes.
Is everybody fine with that?
We need a motion. I move.
Waive second,
I'll make a
capital.
motion, we waive the second.
Second.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
What was your number, 38,000?
There was
48.
48.
48.
48.
So you guys went 48?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can nip it down.
I thought you said 30 later.
Well, it's what it's
the
expected,
wall.
but we moved it forward.
Either way, we start bidding, if it comes
There you
back
go.
to
We can check.
50, we'll stop and go back and get an architect at that point.
Yeah, there you go.
Because it says you have to have a cost estimates and designs if it.
Or I'll have
reaches
a
certain-
talk
I
with the
think that's your,
contractor.
that's your.
Well-
All right.
Don't
So
be
we're an hour in, over an hour in, and we're at your report. Mr. Long.
Item A is submission of budgets. This county actually has a later submission than most counties, which is very hard on our office. But what it says is they shall have a budget submitted to me by March 1st, which means a legal budget. Item A, and you can look through the emails, there's a question of whether they legally approved their budget before they submitted it to me from legal, based on the actual meeting itself. There's a question if it was properly notified. I think it's a question it's came down to from legal. Number two, development services. Josh has been here for several years, never had one late. He just barely missed it. It was March 2nd at 1 p.m. The district attorney, the same thing. The Transit Alliance has not been funded in the past, and they've asked to do one recently. Item D, if we put them in, it's going to be a hardship on finance because we have a very late time anyway, and the budget's 3 weeks, and we'll be adding stuff in. For B and C, their actual, the district attorney is removed their rent, and the contract employees actually, their request is less than last year. Development services, non-operational, other than the cost of living, is actually less than last year. The election commission is significantly more. So that's to give you all the details, but what has to happen at this point, if they have not submitted it to me by March 1, then the budget committee has to accept it as amendment. You're not accepting their budget, you're accepting a submission
So,
of some
I'd
type.
like to make, oh, go ahead, Mr. Becker, I've got a thought.
So B and C were submitted one day late.
Well, B was submitted one day late on March 2nd. C was presented March 31st, they got it to us, they were really late. But they actually, C asked for less than last year. Development Services has asked it, I think, about $25,000 in non-operational less than last year, and all he's asked for is the cost of living.
And so the Transit Alliance still hasn't given anything.
They are not, the issue I have is they have not been funded before. The deadline's March 1st. We have a late deadline, and we got a budget 3 weeks, so I'm objectionable myself to taking the submission.
Okay, so they've submitted something.
Right, and I've told them no. They want us appealed to you guys, and my point of view is we need to reject their submission.
Okay, and then what was the issue, what was the submission issue with the election commission?
The election commission is, the statute says that the Minister of Election shall submit a budget to their board and have approval. They had a meeting one day before the deadline for sending it to me. They sent me one on March 1st by the deadline, but I've been notified by legal that the meeting that they actually have was not properly noticed, which means they did not legally adopt a budget before they submitted it to me on March 1. So they did not, based on my understanding, I did not receive a March 1st submission that had been legally adopted by the Election Commission.
So I think there is a fair, and I'm gonna make a motion here, I think there's a fair way to deal with this that's consistent across the board. And that is that for each of these, for any of them, we use the following logic. We have applied the lesser of between last year's budget plus COLA or whatever the request was. So if the request came in lower, we'll apply that. Otherwise, we default to last year's budget plus COLA.
And in adjustments for health insurance, there's a 1%
Yeah,
adjustment.
fair, that's fine. So a lesser of logic.
You're talking about just for these four?
Just for those four, because they were all late, and so what we're saying is, you're all late, but if you came in under, okay, we'll go with that. If not, we go with last year's budget plus COLA.
And that's just to, you might want to be clear, that's just to consider that their
Consider
submission.
that
You're not
their
going to
submission.
necessarily
That's right,
approve
that's
that.
good.
Consider that their submission. You're still going to have hearings and make
We
changes.
consider that their submission.
What's the COLA now? I mean, you said before 2%, but this is.
Well, it'll go-
For 6%.
Right,
So
but
so
that
basically,
was-
Asking.
so basically operations, and then will be last year's, the lesser of last year's or what they asked for, and then you'll take last year's just salaries and you'll just add the COLA, whatever you guys approve.
Doesn't mean we approve that, that means that's a starting point.
I'm gonna amend your motion to strike D.
They didn't have
Just
anything
strike
last
it
year, so
entirely.
we did it.
Okay, but you included A, B, C, and
But
D.
yeah, but their last year's budget was zero.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, it's totally consistent.
Do we have to give them COLA?
Well, 6% off of zero is zero. So, Mr. Becker?
So I'm seeing here where the election commission disagrees that the meeting wasn't properly noticed, so what's the?
Mr. Sittler?
Well, I sent a letter out, and I believe I also corresponded with the commission, but the only place this meeting was noticed that I could find was on the Election Commission's website. It called it a special meeting, and there are certain requirements for special meetings. One is it's got to be posted at a location for the public to see that there will be a meeting. Let's see here, notice.
Who requested you to look into this?
Well, we happened to find out about it because we were walking by where the meeting was being held and noticed one was going on that we didn't see or know about, and then that's where our inquiry started.
I don't think there's a location on the special.
But either way, didn't you, the point's to some degree moved, right? When did you get the?
She sent it to me on March 1. The question was the budget I see, because I was advised from legal, and my standards, I go by legal unless I have a reason to doubt. Their letter said to disregard anything from the 28th meeting.
Okay.
Which means I would disregard that approval, which means they don't have an approved budget.
If I may, there are 3 requirements for
Yep.
special
Yeah.
call meeting. I'm gonna go through them here. First, the meeting must be published in a notice that's reasonably accessible to the public. 2, the meeting must have the purpose of the meeting listed in the notice. And second, you must have the location of the meeting as well. And in this notice here, we have the time of the meeting, which is Tuesday, February 28, 2023 at 4 p.m. It doesn't say where it is, it doesn't say the purpose of the meeting. And as you all are aware, they're meeting in different locations now, so it's really important to get, for the public's knowledge, where they are, because that's been changing this past month, where they're meeting. So that's why it's so critical, and that's why the statute says any action taken at such a meeting is void, and this is statutory.
It's just the fact it coincided with their budget review, that was coincidental. We just came across this because we crossed paths walking down the hall and saw that there was a meeting going on.
Were they in this room?
I believe it was 112.
It was this room, yes.
Any other questions?
Question. Was there anybody else was there anybody from the public here?
One other person.
So how did they receive notice?
I don't know.
There was one person from the public.
One person from the public was at this meeting.
Is this the meeting where we asked for the recordings?
Yes.
That they didn't give them.
Do we have recordings of the meeting?
They didn't turn them over.
So,
I don't think they've turned them over, have they?
Not to my knowledge.
But there was an actual official request for the copies, I believe, of all those minutes.
We made several requests.
They refused.
I mean, my motion stands.
Mr.
Chairman, if I may.
No.
I'll suspend the rules, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Tom Lee, I represent the Sumner County Election Commission. Appreciate the thought and consideration of this request and the schedule that Mr. Lyons laid out. Just 2 quick things. First of all, the meeting was noticed in the same way that all meetings are noticed at the Election Commission, and that is on the Election Commission website, and I think council's indicated that. The meeting was noticed in a way that was calculated to allow the public to attend, and members of the public did attend. The subject of the notice was published on the website of the Election Commission. It was the budget, and the meeting was noticed in a place and in a way. It was held in this room, where meetings are held.
Can I ask a question? When was it noticed?
February 19 for a meeting of February 28.
It was noticed February 19th. Did it state on February 19th that the budget was going to be a part of it?
It did. The agenda was posted on the website. There was a link on the homepage of the website.
The agenda or the notice?
Sir?
The agenda or the notice?
The notice was on the front page of the website with a link that takes you to the agenda, which was listed under the agenda page. It's still there.
But the notice did not say anything about what the purpose of the meeting was, did it?
If you clicked on the notice, you went to the agenda on the website. As there's a meeting notice right now. It meets tomorrow. The Election Commission meets tomorrow. And if you click on that notice right now on the homepage of the Election Commission, it will take you to where the agenda is published for tomorrow's meeting. That's how it works and how it's been done for a decade. The meeting was noticed properly. Council's rightly set forth the law. The meeting was noticed in accordance with that law, and the results of that meeting were communicated in a timely fashion to Mr. Lawing the next day.
Mr. Mansfield?
Correct me, my understanding is when a special call, we count this as a county commission, when the notice actually has to have the call, not just a link to an agenda. It's the actual notice has to have the call.
That is correct, sir.
That's state law. And so what you're saying is the actual notice did not have the call. Is that
The
right?
actual notice was deficient in 2 ways. First, it did not say where the meeting was. Second, it did not say the purpose of the meeting. for the special call.
Well, I mean, state law is explicit that the actual notice has to have the call, not an agenda, but the call.
That's correct, because the agenda could be amended, prior to the meeting, could be changed, so that's why the notice is so critical.
Correct, and once by state law, a special call meeting, the agenda cannot be added to once the
Correct.
call is made.
Mhm.
That's why the purpose of the notice.
The agenda should follow the notice, not the other way around.
Correct.
And respectfully, members, Chairman, that's not the state law. The state law says adequate public notice is the test. That's 844-103 in Tennessee Code. Adequate public notice. There's a case from 1999 that council has cited correctly that puts some dross on that. But the statute is adequate public notice. And posting the agenda on the website of the Election Commission, as has been done for a decade, is adequate public notice.
So I guess I've got a thought here, and let me go real quick and I'll get you. So two things. I mean, we just get different lawyers, you get different opinions. But one other question. So we have a disagreement about whether it was properly noticed. One is citing the law itself. You're citing the law and case law. It sounds like.
The case law is what, if there were to go to court, this would be contested, that's what we're in control.
So, yeah, 1 second. So one other question I have is, there was one statement that was made earlier, which was that the Election Commission has not provided any recording of that meeting. Is that true?
If you're referring to a public records request that we received, the Election Commission's retained counsel on that matter. I'm sorry, not the Election Commission. My understanding that the County Commission has retained counsel on that matter. A lawyer named Ross Pepper in Nashville, Tennessee. We've been in communication with Mr. Pepper, and what we have said is we received a request for a recording of the meeting, and in accord with the very same policy that all of Sumner County government uses, we said the person making the request must be a citizen of the state of Tennessee, that's state law. And in accordance with the Election Commission policy, again, your policy too, is then you provide a copy of something that demonstrates you're a citizen of the state, usually a driver's license. Every person who makes a public records request in the state knows it, including many of the people in this room.
Respectfully.
If I could interject here.
1 second. I'm going to go around. I mean, obviously, it's just, we put ours up there for everyone.
We'll provide that request tomorrow.
Go ahead, Mr. Mansfield.
I'm gonna go back originally what I said, it was overlooked. And this isn't a courtroom, so I'm getting ready to call this out of order.
Yeah.
And move on.
That's
State
Go
law
ahead.
requires for a special called meeting to have the call and the notice, period. That's state law. County Commission has to do it. I'm not talking about, so I want to make that abundantly clear. One of the complaints is that the notice itself did not have the call. Like the County Commission cannot put out a notice without a call, not an agenda, just it's got to have the actual call and the notice. So that is one thing that was overlooked in a statement. That's part of the problem. That was one of 3 things. So I'm just making a statement that therefore, according to, if this notice did not have the call, it was not properly noticed, and therefore it was an illegal meeting.
So I think we've got around and around about this, so we can go all night, but I do, Mr. Hyde, you had a couple questions you wanted to ask, and I'm going to let you ask these, and then I'm going to go ahead and
I
move
have
forward.
3 questions. One is, have you been officially retained by the Election Commission?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and who made that contact?
Well, by vote of the Election Commission.
Okay. And then, what has been the compensation so far?
You mean how
What
much
have they paid you so far?
Nothing so far, sir.
Will you be charging?
I will.
A good bit?
Reasonable rate.
And where will that money come from?
Well, sir, I think that depends on how this matter all goes, but we'll be sending our invoices to the Election Commission.
To the Election Commission?
Yes, sir.
And they've been asking us for money, so where is their money coming from?
That's a political decision that's not mine, sir.
All right, so, thank you for your commentary, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
And,
Chairman. Thank you, members.
we'll go ahead and move on here. My motion stands as it is. Mr. Becker?
So let me understand something, just taking a step back on this, all the submissions. So all the departments submitted their request by, the date was March 1st. Was
Except
it?
for these three.
No. The request was for them to submit by March 1st.
And it's a
But it's just, it's the request.
It's a private act that says they shall have it to me by March 1.
Okay, I'm asking my question wrong. I mean, they're submitting their budgetary request,
Mhm.
okay? And then we're gonna go through and figure out how much money we wanna give each one, right?
My
At some
question was,
point.
I received advice from legal counsel, which by my standards, if I have no reason to doubt that it's wrong, was basically to disallow anything on the 28th meeting. That would be
No,
the
I'm
motion.
not, I'm taking a step aside from that. I'm just saying, in general, all these departments have submitted a request. Until we go through and have our hearings and, all that stuff and figure out what we want, I mean, it's just a request, right?
That's right.
But the
And
issue
so-
is, we've got to prepare your operating budget by May, and if they don't have them here March 1, there's a lot of work goes into a budget. So all these late budgets cause issues.
Okay.
And if, just like I was saying tonight, if we put in this transit alliance, we're 3 weeks within a multi-million-dollar budget.
No, I got you on that.
But that's kind of where the issue is. If they don't get it to me by March 1, I bring it to the committee for them to determine as amendment. Because if we don't follow the standards, you're gonna have, if I just start taking late budgets, you're not gonna have a budget to July. If I just take late budget after late budget, it will never get finished.
No, okay. I understand
That's
that.
kind of the issue here, is that it will never get finished.
But regardless, my point is, regardless of what everyone's requests are, we can.
That's correct.
We can come back and give them whatever we want to give them. That falls within our revenue
That's
streams,
right.
right?
You can
So I mean, I don't necessarily understand.
It gives.
I don't understand, I mean, I'll be open here. I don't understand why we're bickering back and forth with election commission as much as we are. Some people are choosing to do so. I mean, I understand if it was an illegal meet. I don't understand. We've got their request. That doesn't mean we're gonna say, yeah, you can have all that money. So I guess I don't understand what the end goal here is.
I take no request after March 1 without, they've done it the whole time, without the budget committee coming back and approving it as amended
But you got their request.
on March 1.
Correct. So
Question is,
you got it on that day, but then,
My question is, it's still
for
been
some
done.
reason,
Well,
somebody just walked down the hall and saw a meeting and told you not to honor their request.
My question is,
It
there's
doesn't make any sense to me.
questions, was that request adopted by state statute? The state statute says the administrator of elections shall submit a budget to the election commission, which they will approve. If that was not a valid meeting, they never approved this budget. So basically, Ms. Ashley has just submitted the budget that she created.
I would argue here that logic, which is, I understand where you're going here, but that works both directions, right? Like it's just giving him a starting point.
Yeah.
It's just giving him a
Yeah, I
starting point. So
agree.
that's why I'm like, my motion is basically, it's.
So
it's something that
what
can
is
flag
what
across
is
the board.
their illegal request?
Last year, I can tell you last year what happened. Ag Extension sent theirs late last year. The committee moved their budget completely back to the year before, and the only thing they adjusted was the one county employee's salaries for COLA.
But the request that the election commission provided,
Right now, and I have a copy of it.
how much increase
Just for
was
the
it?
non-salary alone, the increase from the original budget last year, their non-salary last year was $238,682. Their non-salary increase this year is $364,471. So about $130,000 by itself. And then you go
That's like a
down, and they've
45%
increased the election commission. It's been increased. Let's see, election workers.
Okay. But okay, let me. What guidance? Didn't we release some guidance to all the departments?
We did.
What was? Can you refresh my
I
memory?
sent them an email back based on the budget schedule that said these had to be here March 1, and I actually informed them there was a March 1 statutory deadline.
Yeah, I'm talking about. But what guidance
The
did we
guidance
provide?
was
Go back.
no new employees. I mean, I'm just doing this off the
Yeah.
top of my head. No new employees. Aim for target of 2%, target maintenance of effort plus 2% cost of living.
Okay.
that was the general guidance. And I understand that's, people can come, I'm gonna put out what guidance I want, and they're gonna come back with what they want.
Correct.
And then we're gonna come back and approve what we're gonna approve.
Yeah.
They've got a right to present one time, so most of them said 6%. Excuse me, the initial will come in with the 6, but we'll actually have an interactive budget the committee can adjust as they go along to meet their parameters.
My motion still stands. It's just giving you a starting point. I don't
Yeah.
think it matters either direction.
Do you have a
Any other
second?
questions?
Yes.
Yes, I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Mr. Becker with one no. Okay. 4B.
Real quick, that was A, B, and C. Do we need to?
No,
D.
D also counts, because they started with 0 budget, so.
Okay, so D is 0.
D is 0.
Okay.
And I don't want to be a hardliner, but the issue is when we have requests that we're looking now 3 weeks within a multi-million-dollar budget.
No, I'm not.
Nothing against the
I'm not
transit
debating it.
lines.
I thought we had.
No, I'm just trying to, I'm not trying to hardline the
did
transit
A
lines or
through C.
anybody, but
Okay.
the issue is if we don't keep to a deadline, you won't have a budget.
All right.
The next one's to speak about arbitrage compliance. We've done these for years when the interest rates change, and as most of you know right now, bank accounts were earning 1/10 of 1%, 2/10 of a percent. Now they're earning 4, 5, 6, 7%. Some accounts are. At the same time, the rates are higher on the other end. But what this means is, in other words, Sumner County, when we issue bonds, unless they're revenue bonds or certain instances, we haven't issued any of those in my tenure, the actual earnings are tax exempt to the investor. So what we do is we take the actual, until we use it, we actually take the proceeds of the bond and we invest them in CDs and bank accounts. Well, those are taxable investments and we're issuing tax exempt bonds. So there's certain requirements. There's some spend down requirements. There are certain percentages. Because of the size of our bonds, we usually don't meet those. The second one is if you earn arbitrage, there's some de minimis rules and other rules about it. But on the 5th year, within 60 days, if you've got a de minimis amount, you need to refund it. These are things I could probably do, but the question is I don't do them regularly, and they're arbitrage calculations. Usually I put $10,000 in the budget. This past year I put $2,500. If we just do the one that's due next year, it would be, which is in your attachments, $2,900, but to do all the bonds in an interim, $6,700. To know where we are going with the interest, because we're earning a lot of interest right now, if we're going to have to potentially pay it back, I recommend that we transfer the money and I pay for the $6,700 for the arbitrage calculations on the 4 bonds.
Motion approved.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Go ahead.
The next one is your ARP analysis, which is right here. The only change, and it came back from Gen Ops, is my understanding. David can correct me if I'm wrong. It is on the remodel for the health department. So if you look, and it's this sheet right here that was passed out separately. It's kind of a colorful little sheet. It's there's a light yellow line, and then right below it, there's the $608,000. If you take the 608, the amount unencumbered, and the amount left on the PO, it will come to 661, 367.53 if you look in the notes. Right now, my understanding, there's a 25% match grant, which is $1,984,000. That would be the 25% grant match if it's there. And actually, the health department director is here to talk about the grant if you need him to, but that's the only item that's been changed since last month. And to one thing that Matt asked me about to make sure I clarify with the rest of the committee, the deadline, I believe, is April 15th, so it will not be complete at this time. We're still waiting for the final numbers from everybody else. Does anybody have any questions?
And there's no need for any movement here.
No, it's just to keep the committee informed. I think Mr. Baker had a question.
No, I was going with, did we skip C or did we?
Sorry, did I miss C?
You did. Committee improvements.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did skip past that one. That one's been on the agenda for a couple of times. I sent the email to Mr. Shope, but we still haven't had a chance to actually meet on it. It's just, it may be best just to actually defer this to next month.
I would move it on.
I think it's a longer discussion, and I'm not sure.
Motion to defer.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
The next sheet is this one right here, and it's your revenue analysis. And it's got several sheets, and I'll go through these a little slower to kind of make sense. The first one here is your sheet from February 1st. And if you look, what you have on there is all your estimated variance, and we're about 4.188 million. We went through about 2 months since we did the last one because it was an odd month last month. Today, if I reprojected your revenues based on the amount of data I have, we're about at 6.5 million. There's been 3 major revenue changes, which are based on the estimates, and I'll show you why I think we're there, but there's still a lot of caution. It's your business tax, your local optional sales tax, and your will tax. The business tax goes to the general fund, the sales tax goes to debt service and schools, and the will tax goes to the highway and the school department. But if you look on the second page, these are the estimates as of today. And then I went through those 3 revenues, and there's what Mr. Baker asked for, which kind of shows the difference of the two, which has been a significant change. But if you go to the next sheet, I put these in here for you. And what this shows you is your sales tax, your business tax is your first one. On your far left is your collections year to date. Right beside it, your prior year, and this is the difference from prior year, $68,578 up from last year. You're 112.9% of budget. But if you go to the far right, just to kind of check how reasonable we are, that's actually this year's collections. And if we assume they're exactly the same as last year's, it would be $3,569,838. And I made that very low assumption because if you look at the months, they're up and down, and your very large month is the month of May. We haven't seen anything for it. But if you go back and look at the amount, because I actually used another formulation, the amount I showed you that we're estimating is about 3.3 million. So if I reprojected today, you could argue pretty easily it's 3.5, but I still have the 3.3 until we at least see some more data because the majority of your collections are all in May. So we really don't have a lot of,
Where's the 3.3 on this page?
It's on page number 2.
Oh.
It's on the second page of your current. It's under business, and it's about halfway down under the estimated annual. It says 3,310,828. But even if you just use a reasonable, we're about 3.5. So 3.3 is a very conservative number. And the only reason I'm running there is because you have such a large amount of your business tax that you'll collect. And number 2, sales tax, and it's a different story. I'm showing on the actual revenue sheet 47.4. If you take this year's year to date the same way and add last year, you'd come at 48. But there's a big concern if everybody looks at this particular trend. And notice all the numbers are red except for one. And this is my concern why I have a number even lower than if we take that trend. If you notice, you started out at 114% of last year. What this year's sales tax in the same month compared to last year. The next month was 112. The next month's 109% of last year. The next month's 108. Then you have your outliners for 110. Your next month's 104, and this last month was 100.9. If we continue on that current trend, we will actually go negative, which means we will probably be closer to the 47 over there.
And just for the record, what would cause a trend like that?
I'm thinking there's a couple of things that's really affected sales tax. I think we're heading into a recession. Everybody's been discussing it. But these sales taxes got really changed a couple of years back. First, they went in and changed the law about out-of-state collections, which brought a lot of new out-of-state collections. Then the state right after that actually decreased the amount, the dollar threshold they had to report. And at the same time, we had COVID, so a lot of people started shopping more locally. I think probably 2 things. COVID's pretty much, I think, dead at this point. So everybody's shopping more national again is part of it, is what I think. And I think the other one is that people's been living off of their savings, and then when your savings start running out, you have to decrease your spending. So I think we're possibly at the beginning. I think we're getting ready to take a major retail recession because people spent out a bunch of their savings. So that's why I have that $40-some million mark on the next page. The 48,253, but I'm actually estimating this year still that we're only going to bring in 47,409. That's because we see a trend that's possibly negative. To give you a little bit of perspective, back in 2008-9, we actually had 2 years, year over year, that were actually negative, and they ended up equating to like about 1.8% through the whole years. But it wasn't a huge amount, but they were negative. So we could possibly see that 47 number. And the next one that had the major change was actually your will tax. The same thing, if we do a reasonable calculation, we actually end up with less than I got over here. if you look, it's 110.5% of last year, so you think that's probably really low, but my biggest concern is the month of February is 82.7%, that's why I didn't kick it up anymore. So even though year-to-date we're up, your last actual month over month, was down. One thing you do run into, the month of February, it's got 28 days, and it's an odd month, but it was 28 days last year. And that 82 could just be the way the weeks fall, or it could be a sign that they're decreasing. When they got rid of the emission testing last year, these went way up. So it tells us something, and I think our county clerk, I think she may be gone, but she could probably tell you. She could tell you the same thing. Me and her were looking at before she was county clerk, we were concerned about taking the emission back. You're gonna lose several $100,000. But actually, the opposite happened. All these cars suddenly appeared for wheel tax. It's magically appeared.
They can drive legally now.
Well, I mean, it was like a huge influx of.
Draw
your conclusion. They're putting them over in Wilson County.
Mr. Long, in the interest of moving this along, I think we get
We got
this here.
it. That is the end of the revenue report. The next two are the Highway Public Works Analysis and the Financial Statement Memo, which just tells you that they'll be there in the Highway Public Works. Cash flow all looks very positive since September. And those two do need to go into the County Commission, the last two items. But does anybody have any questions about any of my reports?
No, sir.
Thank you.
And thank you for the thorough report. Moving on to old business. So we get to this over and over, and I got it up to full commission, and then it got kicked back to us. This is materials receivable settlement from the city of Portland. And I think the request that came back from the commission was to get an estimate for all of them. Is that complete, Mayor? Okay. I'll go ahead and let you speak to this.
Well, I just handed out to you, the numbers speak for themselves. And what I did is, I basically just applied the same percentages, not the same methodology of percentages that we used before, because, different cities have different growth patterns. So it's, you don't want to just do one set percentage for all of them. So I went back to 2016, and then you had 2017, then you had a percentage change there. And then 2018 percentage change, 2019 percentage change, 2020, 21. Now, here's where we get to an issue, is those cities that actually paid, will they be due a refund? I've got the numbers calculated of if they were given a refund. I haven't showed this to any cities yet, because I wanted direction from the commission on this.
4 of them's paid. The 4 small ones paid already.
So in those 4 small ones, we'll get a refund totaling about $33,000
for FY '21, and then again in FY '22. And everything will be shored up in FY '22.
What's the net? What would you get on the outside? So 33,021, and then about almost about 30,005, about 31,000 again in 23. So what's the net? Do we have that? Let's assume everybody pays and then you get the refund. You don't have the net?
No, I didn't calculate the net. So I just calculated the settlement office for each city.
I make a motion to approve this recommendation, including the refund.
I'll second that. Yeah. Mr. Mansfield?
Well, what's the recommendation, to settle or not to settle? Go for the full amount?
It's your motion.
It's
What's the recommendation?
my motion is for going with the settlement numbers.
So specifically, what I understood that was that we would send letters to the mayor would send letters to each of the cities. Is that what you're?
Yeah, for these numbers. Yeah.
Okay, track it. Mr. Mansfield?
So, since this has come back, I've talked to some, I had people approach me about this, but one being you've had cities that have already paid, so it's not fair to settle with the cities who haven't.
Well, that's what he's saying, there's a refund.
Well, I know, I'm voting against it. That's why. CTAS has said they owe us the money. MTAS has said they don't. The mayor of Hendersonville said, we got the money, we're just not giving it to them because we want to see what they've got. So, again, I don't see any reason we can't wait or ask for whatever the ruling is from the Attorney General to get all the money because the money's due us, and CTAS says the money's due us. And you got MTAS saying it's not, and you got Henderson who's got the money, and just not going to pay it.
Do we know when the ruling's going to be?
There's already one ruling there, an old one. There's already an old ruling out there.
I mean, what are we waiting on then? I mean, that's the problem.
We'd have to get CTAS and MTAS to the table. We've got an AG ruling on it.
Okay. Ms. Brown.
If I may.
Hold on, Mr. Brown. I'm going to get to you a minute. Okay, you go ahead.
You know, we're setting a precedent here, and that's the issue. Is this half of what they owe us?
No, it's based on a percentage.
Okay.
It's based on the growth percentage that Portland submitted.
Yeah.
And y'all said, go ahead and apply this same calculation to all the other cities based on their growth.
But according to TCA 67-5, 1601, in the absence of any agreement between the county and the cities thereof imposing a property tax, local costs of appraisal of properties within the city shall be paid 1/2 by the county and 1/2 by the city. We're not getting anything from the state anymore. So that's where this is going to apply. We're setting a precedent here. We're going to get screwed. We're going to look like big old jolly Santa Claus out there giving the cities whatever they want, you know, and we're paying for it.
Well, I mean,
So-
got to be ready to go.
There's no case
Go
law
ahead.
there.
Yeah, so I took it one more step, and I spoke to Representative Lambert about
Okay.
this issue, because we have this disagreement with the MTAS lawyer and CTAS lawyers. We also at CTAS, the assessor of properties at CTAS also agrees with the law that the money belongs, half of the money is the county and half of it's the city's responsibility. Representative Lambert has agreed to follow up on this, clarify the law from the next session, and get it all clarified, and we all know going forward how it is split this cost.
Okay, thank you.
And I would tell you that it's also inconsistent across assessment offices, which brings another level of clarity. So I think the state really needs to clarify this.
Put some
All
shine.
right, we have a motion on the table.
I'm going to make an amendment.
Okay,
I want to defer this until next legislative session.
I'll second that. I'll second.
I want to collect.
Yeah, I'll second that after hearing that. Any other discussion? All in favor of, all in favor of deferral to the next moment? Go ahead, Mr. Becker.
No, I was saying aye.
Aye. Okay,
Aye.
aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. All righty.
I think item B was sent to the Highway Commission. And I'm not sure we heard anything back.
EMS, they discussed that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there was a,
We had an email today, didn't
wasn't there
Yeah,
40?
that was from the fire.
I think
Toby came up with a dollar.
I think Toby was gonna look at it, but he never forwarded anything to us.
Clearly, I would entertain a motion to defer this.
You talking about the highway?
The driveway.
Point of order, I'm just trying to keep a slight. I would entertain a motion to defer.
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Do you want us to contact Toby? and see
Yes,
what
please.
Oh, he give it to you?
All right. Item C is the chillers. We spoke about that a little bit before.
Question.
Go ahead.
It had to be moved back to the bid to the 23rd, but the concern is there's what we're being told, there's a 40-week lead time, and this unit's in rather bad shape. Would the committee at all be amicable to possibly, because right now we're out to bid, giving us something not to exceed amount, the way we could go ahead and move
Yes.
forward?
What
Could we-
would,
Can we do 350,000 not to exceed coming from the local capital? That way, when the bid gets back, we can go ahead
I
and
would
move
entertain
forward.
such a motion.
Motion.
Second.
We'll waive the second reading, because it's
Yeah.
been.
So I'll second the waiver. Any discussion?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What's the 350 for?
That's to replace the chiller, the pad, to do the rewiring and all of it out here. It's actually gonna all be bid, and I think Highway's actually gonna do the pad for us now, because it's cheaper than the bid.
original bid around 280?
Well,
So how did it jump?
there's a couple of things. One is the unit's dying, and number two, when we got them to actually look at the unit, we've added all this square footage upstairs. So from all the bidders, we've been told we need about 11 more tons than the one out here right now. Just wearing the unit out and it's not working efficiently.
Yeah,
But this unit here, we finished out upstairs.
The 350,000 is given an up to amount.
We'll have actual
It's an
bids
up to
back.
amount.
I didn't understand.
And one of the things that's pushing the cost is it needs 11 more tons and a pad than
It's an up to amount.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
okay.
we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We did waive the reading.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to new business.
Under item 6A, could I make a request of the chairman? Like on these ones that say for information only, because they actually go through the education committee and they go through, not the ones that require approval, and they actually go to the county commission. Is there any way we could just pull these off and let them go directly from education straight to, for the information only, because there's no
Yes.
votes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it pulls 100 pages out of this particular
Yeah,
agenda.
I think that would be super helpful.
Yeah. I mean,
We'll still send
the
the approval
only
ones.
thing that I did was I cautioned them whenever, on his budget request, 156, which was ESSER funds, which is temporary. They added a whole lot of personnel right there. And I told them, I said, don't expect the county to give you the money for those folks, because
I thoroughly
it's running
trust
out.
that you will be diligent
Yeah.
about bringing
Yeah.
I thoroughly trust that Mr. Brown.
We'll leave all the approval ones on here anyway. That's just the informational only ones I'm discussing.
Go ahead, Mr. Wong.
Item number B1, well, actually, just item 1, is all actually pass-through funds in one form or another, and I can go through all of them if you want me to. They actually have a revenue that's at least as much as what they're asking for.
Motion to group and approve A through D, 1A through D, B1, A through D.
Second. Any discussion on these? None. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Item 2 is something, and we went with our attorney too, this is something we're required to pay, and it needs to be paid this month, and when we go through the budget cycle, we'll try to probably budget this under the county commission's line item or somewhere.
Motion approved.
Second. All in favor?
But then I've got a question.
Go ahead.
So I remember when this came up a few months ago. Why is this under county commission?
We can, where else?
This is for
Mental health evaluation.
mental health of
Where would you
prisoners?
rather
We're
us to-
required to provide this service, and it's gotta come.
And that's something that you guys control budget-wise. I mean, we
So
could
we
ask
were-
the jail to put it in theirs, but
Ask the who?
we could ask the jail to put it under the jail. I mean,
To me, it just sort of makes.
but it's kind of involves the courts more than the jail, so it's an argument. We basically, what's happening is it's coming down to, I think, my office, and we're passing it over to legal. And I think when he first got here, I received 3 from earlier years, and I sent it over to him to evaluate, because suddenly I got, from earlier years, these 3 bills I'd never seen before. And it was determined, there's a statute that requires us to pay those. And they're usually rather sporadic and rare. I think I said
That's
one
the
of them.
biggest problem, there's no predicting them.
Okay.
So I would recommend, when we get the budget, we may look at maybe putting $1,500 in the county commission's budget or somewhere.
Because we did 1,600 just a couple months ago.
But that was, some of those was from a earlier year that we just now seen, so.
Oh, really?
Dues, yeah.
Oh.
So I say 1,500 would be a good estimate, and then if it comes back, we just have to amend
Okay.
it.
All right.
Build a run.
He may have sent them to
Any other discussion on this?
Did you send them to us? I think so.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Can
All
we
right.
waive the second reading since it's a bill sitting out there?
Yeah.
I'll make a motion.
Yeah.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay, so this one, new courthouse, Mr. Long.
We
This is
have-
153,000 above.
Right, we have $600,000 in the budget, just came in 153,337 over it. I would recommend one of two things. One, we need to probably take it out of local capital, or number two, change the actual specs by removing items. And I think the judge is here to discuss option one. The only reason I don't recommend taking it out of the current budget is there's still over $3 million worth of estimates on that courthouse, and we're down to like $150,000 worth of contingency. So if we take this, eats every contingency, and the way things are going because of inflation, we still have $3 million worth of estimates are out for bid with us. So my recommendation is not to take it out of any kind of contingency at this point. And we are at the very, going toward the end, thank goodness.
I'll second it, just to discuss, but I do have, I'm gonna get a few questions.
Yeah.
And I'll, again, suspend the rules. Mr. Flynn, thank you for
Sure.
staying here as long as you have.
No problem.
I know you're working tomorrow.
I ain't working.
You and Ms.
Worked until
Templeton both.
6:30 tonight, when I came over.
So-
I ain't did it, I did.
I knew it was gonna be a long one today. What's gonna break if we reduce, if we de-scope this?
All right, here's what happened. It's got 600,000 in the original budget, as I understand it. It's basically the same stuff, it's just gone up 153,000 in the last 3 years.
No, I understand.
And this is bare minimum for us. In general sessions, we're required by law to record. We'd like to have a video player so that we can play DUI videos when we have a trial, so that counsel can see them, the defendant can see them, the state can see them, and quite frankly, so that the judge can see them. Right now, we wheel a television in my courtroom. It's about this big and playing. We have a podium. We have no AV, just microphones, basic microphones. This would pay for microphones to hook up to a recording system so we can actually record, which is what we're required to do in any preliminary hearings in general sessions. It's outlets on the, we were able to get some of the money that's not included in this by using some other funds to get Elmos and printers and copiers already in my courtroom anyhow prepared for the move. This is talking about microphones at the podium. It's talking about AV equipment on the screens. It's got a screen at the judge. You have a screen over here, and it'll have a screen at the bench, so I can see what's going on. I can stop it when I have the ability to stop a tape if it's not admissible, to say I'm cutting it off right here because it hadn't been edited. It's general sessions court. And it's like that way for all the courtrooms. It's basically the bottom line stuff in each courtroom. It's just the price of inflation has gone up. You know, they thought they had $600,000 enough money in the budget when they did it, but it's, you know, wouldn't bid out then. And as we're coming to this conclusion, we took those same specs, bid them out, and this is what it came back as.
It includes audio also.
It includes audio, right? That's the huge.
The audio is a big portion of it, all the audio speakers and all those courtrooms in that big building, yeah. And the estimate was 600, inflation's running up, and I really think if we rebid it without moving the spring specs down, we're not gonna do any better, because we had a good bid on it. So you only got really the two choices. We can figure out what, if anything, we can remove. I just recommend against taking it from contingency because we still have $3 million worth of.
So you would recommend it come from generals?
Well, local capital, or just to be fair, that or lower the specs. But based on what the judge is telling us, I don't think there's a lot they can really remove from it.
Who's got the spec sheet? Do you have the spec
It's
sheet?
upstairs. We've got it where we beat it. We can, and it was, we had consultants working on it with us, so there's a lot of them.
I mean,
I gotta see where $750,000.
yeah.
Call Mindy tomorrow and we'll send you guys the.
You know, if we, you know, I'm just pressing here, like, if we deferred this for a month, what would happen?
I don't know. We'd have to see how much time's on the bid. Usually there's 90 days on most of ours, so we probably got time, but I'd have to look. As long as it's not been sitting in, I think we just got this one back the other day.
Because I would like to know, like, you know what I mean? Like, I would like to know.
$750,000
I mean,
is a lot.
not that I don't trust you, Judge Glenn, but it's like a trust and verify thing.
I'm just saying, you're gonna have this courtroom, and we're gonna have have portable microphones. I mean,
It's probably gonna delay.
We got the basic,
I
we
get
got
it.
the basic package. We were asked for a needs and a wants. This is our needs. This doesn't include what we want.
Let me say one thing, every time we delay what's happened consistently with
It's
this
gone up.
current inflation and everything going on, it slows down the next phase and we get hit by cost increase after cost
We
increase.
can look at it between now and next week.
We will have somebody
I don't even-
email those to you, just make
I don't even care if we approve it, I just wanna see the
Yeah,
list.
yeah.
Let's have,
I mean, it's really only
Jessica
going
to
up
get me to
20% as compared to most things. It's just
Mandy and Miss Northleaf to send the committee members a copy of the bids and the specs.
Any
My
other- we
motion
have a
is to
motion.
waive a second too.
All right. Any, so we have a motion, does the second agree to?
You were the
I
second,
I'll,
yes.
I'll agree to it.
Yeah.
It's getting late. All right, any further discussion?
Do you want to waive the second
Yes,
reading?
he just did that, so I second it again. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Local capital, correct?
Local capital. That's, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
motion to group to approve C, D, and E.
What about E? There's no contract on that. That's what it's been granted to do. Somebody want to evaluate it.
What we
Oh,
just
okay.
do?
What's the county
that's-
clerk that got
The county
added?
clerk was, is two,
That's
that's two
transfer to from overtime and the regular people over
Second,
to.
wait a second reading.
Hold on a second. What's the motion?
To group and approve C, D, and E, and waive the
Oh.
second reading.
Well, hold on. Did you add in transfer of funds?
Yes, I
to city?
did. That's the county clerk, that's 2B.
Can we talk about E separately?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's sure.
just do
Okay, that's fine, C and D,
All right, I'll second that.
the C and D.
and waive the second reading.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That's technically, that included you.
The only thing I would like to say is we've done these for years, and this is one of the concerns that keeps getting brought up, and I think the mayor said the same thing. You make agreements for them to like pay $5,000 to keep up, there's not any actual physical agreements to this, there's a letter. That's kind of keeps coming back and causing issues. It was on the courthouse was one of the big ones. If you're not careful, it may be more advantageous to get an it may be more advantageous to get an agreement for them to cover year out of year before you,
You're talking about from Hendersonville, the city?
if they agree to cover the 5.
Yeah.
Because there's also an MOE question, because if they give us the 5 this year, and then they refuse next year, it's actually gonna cause an MOE with the libraries, am I correct? That's correct, don't we?
Yeah, they have agreed to give us $5,000 because they were hoping that we could get open by April. And so the $5,000 was to cover us the last quarter of fiscal year 2023. And then they've agreed to also give us 20, that they have no issue with failing that we wouldn't get 20 from here on out for the full year.
For next year, but
So
you don't
what's
have
the-
anything in
so-
writing though.
Yeah, so
Now,
we,
there
what we,
is a letter in here, but we do have a little bit of concern about their wording, because it says that, the
I'll
letter
suspend the rules.
says
So-
that
it's
normally
okay.
we've always.
All right, you already did it, it's okay, go ahead.
I cannot read it.
No, I was making.
Because there were some concerns on MOE.
Yeah,
that
well,
were issues.
I was officially suspending the rules so you could mention.
Oh.
I kind of screwed up.
No, it's okay, it's all right, it's late.
But, we normally get 50,000 a year, but that's always been earmarked for books. This year, we went back to them just to see, because if they would entertain giving us some extra money so that the library could be open on Fridays. They will give us 5,000 for the last quarter of this fiscal year, and then 20 going forward. Their letter says that the county will match those funds. And we don't want that in there, so that if we agree, and the library board agrees to all of this on Wednesday,
And getting a contract.
then we'll have them rewrite that letter.
Okay.
Because what we were doing was when we dissolved the library system, and we had taken the money from the library system, coupled with the salary adjustments, and reworked the staffing at all of the libraries. Hendersonville should have now plenty of staff to open on Friday without coming back to the county and asking for any additional money like we did a couple of years ago when we tried to do this the first time.
Okay, so I feel like what I'm hearing then is probably the right call is a motion to defer Don't think anything breaks if you guys.
Yeah, I think the board needs to approve it first on Wednesday,
So I would
and then
entertain
come
such a
back.
motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Motion adjourned.
Thank you.
So moved. Second.
All right,
Next.
here we go.
Probably, we're over.
Just a question. Can I ask you a question before you adjourn?
Now, go ahead.
Your resolution about county expenses, if somebody's gonna pave a road, they charge the department. Do we need to redo our whole budgets? Because the reason why I'm saying is I've got sheriff's deputies that work in my courtroom. I don't pay for them out of my budget. They're paid for by the sheriff. So am I going to be charged under my budget for the use of those court officers in my courtroom?
We put those under court
I
security.
think
They're clearly
we would have
marked,
to remove all
but
the money.
they're marked, so they're marked as court security.
Right, but they don't come under my budget.
Right.
Yeah,
But they're still called court security.
well, that's right, so. but
I wouldn't
if
think it
they're
makes
called
sense to do
security
that.
now, that wasn't, so that was not what that, I got the question, that's not what that was. Now you're gonna do it to me, because that was not what the
We're talking
intent
about
was.
radio.
But words matter.
Words matter.
They're talking about the
And
radios.
this is a resolution, words matter.
They're talking about the radios and stuff.
Got it.